Hello and welcome to Feedback. This is episode 35 and our last final episode of 2020. There are more to come in January 2021, so please stay tuned. Today, we're actually joining each other from different continents, so yeah. Thanks, Rob. Today we're joining together from different continents, actually. So when you see this episode, we're actually have already recorded this previously. But please, still, if you have any questions, please send it to us ahead of time at feedback@yarnwire.org or join the live chat on YouTube. One of us will be there to answer your questions. So today we're really excited to be joined by Misato Mochizuki and Ilan Volkov. We are talking with them today about Misato's 2015 piece for Yarnwire called, let me see if I can say this correctly, Le Monde du Rond et Carré. So the world of circles and squares. We love this piece and performed it so many times, so we're really excited to chat with Ilan and Misato about this piece. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ilan.
Hi. Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to see you all. Haven't seen Yarnwire for quite a few years, and I've never met Misato before, so great to see you. And we're gonna, I think, go straight into the piece. But before we do that, I wanted to ask one of the Yarnwire, whoever wants to answer, how did you encounter Misato's music first, and what led to this piece, basically?
I'll hop in there. It all started with a blue, I forget the name of the CD, but it was a Kairos record. Yeah, Siblusikan.
I just got it over there, yeah.
Yeah. And I was rummaging through Amoeba Records in Berkeley, California, upstairs in their contemporary music section. And they always carried, the most recent Kairos at the time. So I picked up that record not knowing, just trusting the label, and took it home. And I remember putting it on and just being like, whoa, this is awesome. And that was like many years before we even thought of working with Misato. And, the group commissioned and was active and everything. And then we were thinking about, who would be cool to meet and work with. And that CD was still resonating in my mind, So I was like, it would be cool to somehow work with Misato. Like, her music is so cool. And I think a friend of ours, Meifang Lin, had met Misato before. And
right.
Right. And she provided the introduction. And that was that.
Right. So the premiere was at Lincoln Center, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
2015.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
July 2015.
Yeah. And the first thing that kind of one is struck by this piece is the fact that the percussionists are not on stage when it starts. So the setup, maybe we can see the setup now, is kind of, the pianos are kind of with their backs to the audience in a sense. And then there's lots of percussion, and then there's a set drum set in the front, which is also empty for quite a lot of the piece. And then we have these sounds from outside the stage. And I was thinking how, Misato, how was this your first idea for this piece, or this kind of came later?
I already had this idea to have a kind of theatricalization, because I believe in thought in this way to evoke something. Of course, it will go on when you hear only the recording, but I think it's nice. It's the privilege of live performances to see something and having the information coming from the visual aspects. Right. And yeah, many people says, including my students at university as well, they say new music is too difficult to understand. So I am searching since certain time how to speak more with the music like I write. So yes, this idea was from the beginning.
Right. And may I ask one of the Wire players to jump in there and say, when you got the score, did you have to immediately think, how is this possible in the venue that was planned?
I don't remember even knowing what the venue would look like at the time. I think it was when we finally loaded in to the space, we were like, let's figure it out. And I think that's always been an important part of playing this piece. We've played it in so many different places. Our dress rehearsals are often about staging and walking, the paths taken, set up. So yeah, it's an important part of the piece for sure.
The one thing we did know was that it was not a room that was normally used for concerts. I mean, they do shows in there, but it was kind of repurposed. And we knew that they were going to build a stage for us so that people could kind of look up. And we kind of roughly measured it out. But when we got there and saw how little space there was on stage, literally it could fit the setup and that's it. And we're like, okay, how are we even gonna, walk around in this thing? So that was funny.
And I guess the other kind of interesting thing when one looks at the score is the repetitions there. And I mean, I couldn't really follow the repetitions. So is that actually quite flexible? From the very beginning, Misato, you were thinking, well, I write certain amount of repetitions, but then the players can kind of play with that in each performance?
Yes, it's quite open. You can repeat as much as you like, and it depends on the place as well. And I didn't imagine the place was like that. So I think you did quite freely, right? Ian and Russell.
Yeah, we do it based on on the pacing and kind of what's happening with the pianos. By now, I think both of us have it memorized and, kind of deal with it like that. I think there's a child in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I thought also I need this kind of preparation to make the place and the atmosphere special, somewhat sacred. For that, you need some time. So not only for the piece requires, I don't know how I wrote it, but I think I wrote just repeated
right.
mark.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can adapt as much as you like to prepare really everything.
And the sacred thing, Misato, the bowls that you had us use also, I searched for those and had to go to one of those religious shops in Tokyo to get the right pitch. So I don't know if that has some kind of ceremonial aspect to it, but
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so those high B's and not C's or anything else, but high B's that you chose, which then gradually the pianos also join on the same pitch.
Yes.
And I love actually how in the video you guys do it as if it's really easy to play those high B's together. And maybe you give us some inside info about how that was done.
You want to cue it, Ian?
Oh man, yeah, on Zoom, I don't know.
Yeah, let's try it.
All the
Like
latency.
a unison clap.
Yeah, it's terrible. Someone always leads it. So like at the beginning, E and I think maybe at the beginning you were doing it, but we shifted it depending on who can see. You know, we go like down, up, boom, and we kind of like see it in the periphery.
So you give the last kind of 2/8 notes or something.
Yeah, and then we pass it to Laura once we get up on stage, because we can always kind of see her in the periphery, and she leads it from then on.
And do you guys actually do the accelerando that's kind of marked there, or it's kind of like not really possible while pacing?
I think
until we're all playing together, it's difficult. I think Ian and Russell are not really even thinking time in some ways when they're just, well, you know, they're I mean, it's so slow. You're thinking about your walking. That's the pacing.
Actually, I'm counting.
Right.
I think it's in the score.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah.
I think in this score it just says 5 to 6 seconds in between, right? And then at some point we sort of lock into a quarter note feel, and then within the score there's flexibility as well. But I think it's pretty free. It's like
yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing, that it kind of starts with a downbeat, and it says like 8 to 10 seconds, and then later it kind of shifts to this to this pacing that's kind of leading into the new notes, which is kind of like a big shock when there's some new notes there. I mean, I love how this piece develops really slowly, and also the fact that there is repetitions there of a note, which then later you have fast repetitions in the snare. It's kind of like an echo of that, but much faster. Were you thinking, Misato, straight away about the repetitions at the beginning of a single note, slow repetitions, and then the last kind of part with the repetitions in the snare, or that kind of came later in the thinking process?
I didn't think anything. When I compose, I don't make any plan. I just sow the seeds of thoughts, ideas into the music, and then the music comes from that, and it grows up by its own. I feel like that. So actually, I'm guided by music. It's not me to control the music. Yes, especially for chamber music, it's like that. And the beginning, I wanted to show the kind of the circle world, the world of the circles, which signifies the world, the way to live with sharing the thing. So that's why the only one note, B, high B, is shared, coming from the percussionists, and then shared by pianos. And while you share the things, it's peaceful. So it's kind of ceremonial mood. But then actually to write this piece, I was thinking about war, because it was summer in 2015, the first performance. And actually it is my first performance in the States, and the first experience with collaborating with American players, I think. So naturally, I was thinking about the relation between the States and Japan. And at that moment, media were talking about the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. So yes, when you think about our relation between the States and Japan, we can't think about it without being emotional or pathetic. So I was thinking about war or the violence. Yes, after 70 years, or for all time of our history, wars are always there and it never stops. So I wondered why. And I thought maybe this desire to dominate everything to him own is the root of this kind of violence. So while you are sharing the things, the world is peaceful, but when you want to become very selfish, want to have desire to have everything, then it becomes this kind of fight and kind of violence. So I thought violence can be really related to human nature. And because I noticed that observing children, including my nephew, I noticed even few months old babies pick a bigger piece of food if there is a choice. And many boys like play fighting, or most games and sports are based on battles. So everyone says that violence is not good, but then why do we enjoy the violence? Or because we tend to enjoy it, that's why we say it's not good. The desire to dominate, bullying, bashing, discrimination, all kinds of harassment, putting someone down, authoritarianism, vanity, Schadenfreude, all these are human nature based on the instinctive desire to survive. So that must be a reason for many social problems. So, and I feel a similar element in the sound of percussion, actually. So actions such as hitting and scratching can be taken as violence, but also can create rhythms and sounds that make people excited with joy. And so this is what I wanted to show in the last part of my piece. But it came really later. It's really how I terminate, I finished this piece. Then this idea came brink. So, and at the same time, with rhythms and intonations are combined relationally, it can become a language that can lead to various highly intellectual ideas. So, le monde des carrés signifies this kind of world with lots of fights and based on the selfish desire. Yes, why I started this?
Well, that's already quite a lot.
Yes,
but maybe it would be good now to actually see the opening part. I mean,
okay.
we're gonna skip the actual beginning because I want the audience hopefully to hear that in the context of the whole piece. But we're gonna go in there after like 45, 50 seconds of the high B's with Ian and Russell moving around the space around the audience, and then the pianos joining in, and then the beginning of what comes next. Let's hear that first.
It's changed so much since then, I feel like.
Yeah.
So we kind of saw most of the beginning until actually Russell joins and picks up the vibes there, right, Russell?
That's right, yeah.
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 So I wanted to ask Misato, actually, I mean, it's really striking, these repeated scores and the harmonies there with the little grace notes. It's kind of the only thing that kind of springs to mind is maybe like the end of Le Nos by Stravinsky, which is kind of like the obvious analogy. How did you come up with this? I mean, do you remember anything about like thinking about this chord section? We can also see the score, the actual score that shows it.
I think so. The beginning was the idea to share one note, and then little by little, every players become selfish to develop each one by themselves. So how to develop it little by little, that was only the idea. And little by little, I tried to go other places by each one.
Nice. I guess from this section, we have basically rhythms kind of becoming more and more complicated. You heard the beginning of that now with Ian playing some strange rhythms on top of the regular piano square rhythms. Or maybe they're not squares, maybe they're circles. But now we're going into this section where Russell on vibes and Ian on bells, doing a kind of 9 against 8, where you can also see them moving in a kind of interesting way, so they can actually play that. I was thinking about what's kind of the easiest way to do that, kind of, because it's basically for the next like quite a few bars, you're linking with the same rhythm that's going very much against what the pianos are doing, and then you need to be more or less in the same dynamic and kind of really accurately. Was that quite difficult to do, or that slotted in quite easily?
Oh, Ilan, man, I knew you would ask the hard-hitting questions.
I think we think triplets.
That section is really hard. It's really hard to hear. For sometimes it's more possible than others depending on the acoustic, and how we're set up, if we're facing each other or not, I remember for this premiere, we worked really hard on like subdividing some version of a triplet rhythm behind, and then like communicating a new tempo so that we could both link in with the triplet. And we kind of looked at each other and kind of were bobbing along in that tempo. It doesn't always work because you get this processional rhythm gets so ingrained that it's really hard to break out of it, because also you have these massive pianos just like playing at you, and you're like, no, I gotta think the triplets.
When the rhythm changes from the kind of triplet pulse to the 16th rhythm, there's another switch that we have to make in the middle,
right?
And like to kind of keep that energy moving forward is important.
I mean, I love how it's kind of like there's like now the next until they actually stop and you have that huge climax with the resonance, there's no stopping in the sound at all, and there's a kind of acceleration, obviously also crescendo, things getting louder, accelerating, and there's multiple rhythms happening with the two pianos. And Misato, is there anything that kind of, is that something you do a lot, or this was pretty unique to this piece?
About what?
I mean, that this kind of accelerating movement where a lot of instruments, kind of four instruments, are kind of getting faster and louder together.
It's not only the piece, I think. Yes. Yes, I use quite often. Quite. Mm-hmm. I remember now 2 pieces for symphonic orchestra. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's unconsciously I overuse it. It's not good.
Well, 3 times isn't overuse.
Well, yeah, it becomes really a cliche of mine, so it's not a good sign. But yes.
You know, it was cool. Sorry, I cut out there, I think, for a little bit. But like every time we do it, somehow we end up in the right place at the right time. And like, so it works. And it's like very nerve-wracking, especially the first time. It works. And then you get there and you're like, yes, awesome. So I would keep using it.
Totally. I mean, we should watch this next part, which is kind of like building into this climax. It's just actually after we stopped watching, but it now you can see this new beginning of the acceleration process with lots of rhythms and obviously crescendo and getting louder. I mean, I love also the use of registers here with the low pianos and the high vibes and stuff. It's like all over the place until you have the boxes, which is kind of, maybe we can look at that for a second. So it's like that's like those boxes are where you're basically playing as fast as possible, right?
Pretty much. I think there's a little bit of flexibility that we try to build in, leave a little bit of space to get faster if we want to kind of push the energy a little more. But
and then the dynamics are kind of written, but they are still quite free, right? Individually, you can kind of do what you want, right?
You have the freedom to fluctuate.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's watch this second part where the acceleration kind of begins, still quite calmly, but it's going there. That's great. So here, I mean, suddenly one has, that's kind of striking for me when it begins the actual triads. It's like, whoa, suddenly we are there. I love that part. Is that quite tricky to get, Laura, there? And how was that?
No,
like, yeah.
Well, it's so interesting. It's actually after so much sort of, I guess, not totally free, but there's, a a lot of this very chromatic winding material that leads into that section. And yeah, I don't get to play triads very often in our line of work. So it actually feels like my hand knows what to do. It feels really kind of, and it's such a change, you know, the harmonies and the register and that how it sort of pops out of the texture, something that's so different than what's been happening before. I really love that moment too.
And Ian, I wanted to ask you about this kind of specific thing that happened near the end of that clip, in the middle of that clip. You were playing kind of crotals, hitting and bowing, which is really such a great sound. Is that really safe, or anything can happen any moment? Every time I conduct something with bowed crotals, the player is already, before I speak, he's already, oh yeah, well, it sometimes doesn't speak, you know.
Well, it's I think that part of the piece has changed the most, at least in my own setup from that initial concert. We've now moved the crotal, and this was something that developed over a series of performances. And then when we had the opportunity to do the piece with Misato again, we kind of cleared this idea. But the crotales have now shifted to the front of the stage, kind of nestled in between the two pianos. And I think the difficulty in the premiere was trying to bow a crotale while also holding a mallet. So just logistically, it was a little bit difficult. What am I trying to say?
Although you seem to be doing it just fine.
I think I was very deliberate in that performance, but thank you. I think we've tried to maybe push the kind of like aggression aspect of it a little more now. Less like a controlled, maybe.
I think we were thinking about how to visually get at what Misato had in the score, right? Which is why we brought the crotales to the front, because like it's a little hidden, the process as it is set up at Lincoln Center. And then when we moved it to the front, it's like all of a sudden Ian is now moving again, you know, and
so he still does the first movement of taking the crotales from your setup to his, but then he moves it again to the front.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I no longer take it back to my setup. I just take it from Russell and then go to the front.
Yeah, it gets me extra angry.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's really interesting. Misato, I wanted to ask you about this process that you're kind of shifting from one material to the other, which is like basically the first 9 or 10 minutes of this piece. And I read in some of your writings that you were also influenced a lot by studying computer music back in the 90s, I think, at Yerkam with Tristan Murray and others. And that's kind of seeped into your acoustic music, that you're using some processes from electronic music into your acoustic music. Is that something that comes to mind in this piece, or it's just kind of a general thing that you do? I'm pretty interested to hear about that.
I don't know if it comes from the computer music, but yes, I was interested in kind of sound morphing, but very analog way. As you see, I don't even write my score by computer. I'm not capable. So I'm very old-fashioned. I don't do any SNS. So I'm kind of very late person. So I don't really use computer to compose either, but to make kind of sound morphing by orchestration, by instrumentation, is something very interests me. So like something is happening and it seems like really repetitions of the same thing. And then up, you notice that you arrived something else somewhere else. So this feeling I'd like to create by music. And this is the same for whole piece. So basically this piece is really based on many repetitions of different things. So first you hear many times only one note, repeatedly, and then little by little it changes, and then you notice that something different is started to be repeated, and repetitions, and then when there are many repetitions happen, you don't really listen to. At the same point, at a certain point, you lose attention, and then oh, we have arrived somewhere else. I would like to create this kind of feeling. So I didn't calculate anything. It's just a kind of notion of time. But I think in the music, this kind of perception and perception for audience is important. So you clearly realize that you started from only one note, and then little by little, we have arrived somewhere else. And then what's next? This kind of dramatism or perception has been lost in many new music. So this is what I try not to forget.
Interesting. It's also interesting in the face of thinking about pieces like the intermezzi cycle that also Russell played one of the pieces, and I mean, I guess there you're talking much more thinking about fragments and placing different fragments against each other. So this is actually kind of the opposite idea, right?
Well, but it's a bit similar because I don't plan anything in advance. So I had actually a kind of complex coming to Europe to study compositions, because everything has to be decided in advance and you have to be able to speak about it. But I don't plan anything. And then you can be criticized. Then you don't think anything, right? But Roland Barthes' writing, roots of Roland Barthes' writing is in fragmented discourse. He doesn't decide anything in advance, how to argument the subjects. And he writes one thing, and then another thing, another thing, another thing. And at the beginning, it doesn't have any relation. But then afterwards, you see how it comes after one after another. And then it makes the sense. And so in a way, I was encouraged by Roland Barthes' writing, because I thought it's, I compose as if I didn't think anything. And especially in Germany, I was many times asked, what is the form about this piece? But I don't decide any form. There's no pre-established anything.
But
so,
although this piece has a very strong form, so I mean, your work process is improvisatory, and obviously you're kind of using your instincts as you go along. But as you say about Barthes, kind of a form is established by your actions in a sense, right?
Yeah, but it's really unconsciously. I am not really conscious about it. I just let, as I said before, I just leave the music to be free. So I'm conducted by the music, because I really consider the music as a living stuff. So I don't control the music, it's living. So.
It's wonderful to hear a composer say that. Usually I have these kind of conversations with improvisers. That's exactly what they say. Music is actually kind of letting, I mean, you have to let the music happen and you have to let the instrument kind of guide you. So it's in some way very similar.
Yes, but it's not really improvisation. If it's,
no, of course not.
If you let the music to be really improvised, then you stay in the same cage, kind of, because from the improvisation, I feel like nothing new is coming really. But anyway, when I write, the score is written, and with the players, the interpretation is each time different. Even by Jan Warrior, I had the chance to listen to the second time at Mira Theater concert, and it was already quite different. There was something new add naturally maybe, and I would like to keep this kind of free room for players. It's interesting when the composer writes the music, only the score doesn't make a music. You need interpreters, you need players, and how they play makes the music really different. And I really have confidence to good musicians, and I'm really happy about this encounter with Jan Wire, because from really the beginning, I was always very happy to work with them humanly and also musically, and so I was very happy afterwards because of this music Mira Theater concert, portrait concert. The my solo piece for percussion was played by Russell, and also the solo piece for piano was played by Ning, and she made a disc as well. And I see the many times they play it, it becomes really something new and also something really fixed. It's really a bit contradictoire, but you see.
Yeah, totally. And so where we reached in the piece, in a sense, into this kind of really big climax. Just before the big climax, the two pianists are kind of adding noise, kind of like changing the color of the piano while still playing, right? Which I kind of really love that part. Maybe Laura and Ning can tell us a little bit about that moment.
Yeah. And well, it's interesting. This part has also changed a little bit. How we arrive at this moment has changed. I think originally in this performance, as we were playing, we added these sort of wooden elements into the piano. Like I had two either pieces of wood or wood blocks originally. I've used different materials, but always some sort of hard, heavy piece of wood. And Ning has had a drumstick. And so now what happens is that we have these sort of preset in our instruments. And when Ian is in his new circumambulation, whatever you call it, when he's rotating around with the crotales, he is like the disruptor who is introducing these.
So he's adding the. Oh wow!
Yeah, that changed, but
it's still to both instruments.
To both instruments, yeah.
Okay, great.
But the sonic effect happens roughly in the same place. So the sonic effect.
But there is kind of more theatrical elements, and you can also just you don't have to stand up and do all that.
Exactly.
Yes, the sound for my setup changed slightly. So I think when we performed at Lincoln Center in 2015, I had to press down the snare drum. So there's like this really dry but sort of noise sound. But now it's with pedal without pressing down. So it's really like rattly, louder type of noise. So that has shifted a bit too.
Amazing. So then there is another moment there where Ian has to go to the front, right? To the drum set. And so you kind of have to acknowledge him being there and know more or less when to stop, right? How does that work?
Yeah. So are you asking for the pianists?
You also have this issue. You're on the vibes still there, right?
I'm on the vibes. I'm thinking about it a little bit later. Sorry, when he's actually just playing.
I think I have a roughly 25-second long cluster going all out craziness from the bottom of the keys. From the bottom of the keys to all the way to the top of the keys, and then do like the biggest glissando, and then we crash at the end, and that's when when Laura, Russell, and I sort of are still ring, but we stop playing. That's when Ian emerges from all that crazy sound.
Oh yeah, this really amazing musical moment, which is really powerful. We should say it's really powerful actually watching it. I mean, yeah, it's great on video, but I would love to actually be in the room, because the resonance of the piano is not something you can really record. It's too interesting to be able to control that way. Maybe we should watch that part in the video to see that whole section going into what comes next. So this is kind of the final section, which, I mean, this is like a real strict pulse, which I know happens in a couple of other pieces by Misato as the beginning of a piece. I think, is it Chimera that starts that way,
That's
Misato?
true.
Right.
Yes.
So, I mean, in Chimera, which is an earlier piece, it starts with that kind of pulse, and then things are added on top. There's a kind of loop element, right?
Yes, at that moment I was using mini pulsation in the pieces, because I thought, as earlier I was talking about how we can notice about the detail of the piece, the music notion and perception. And I thought, even though many complicated thing is going on, when you have the pulsation, it becomes like a map. You can be guided by pulsation. So I use very much pulsation from 1996, 97 to 2002. I think I use very much.
So in Chimera, there's also like techno and stuff. Like I remember reading about
yes,
that.
and
There's
the
like
sound
actual
morphing as well.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So sound morphing, so same elements. I mean,
Right.
there's so many things that you're able to kind of really bring into your music, and you're open about it, which is not that common these days. Quite a lot of composers are kind of like, yeah, no, I don't have any inspiration. So it's great to actually talk about, mentioning Roland Barthes or mentioning all these other names I mean, there is this kind of priest that you're into as well. Maybe we have enough time at the end to talk about him. I've never heard of this guy, Omega Point guy. But before I go too far from where we are, Ian, how does this section kind of work? Because I mean, you have to start with a really quiet pulse, really strict pulse. And did this kind of part in the piece, from the moment kind of you started playing it to now, how does that shifted in your mind and view?
I think the biggest thing that's shifted for me is that I think in the premiere I was most concerned with somehow executing something properly, whereas now I think I might think a little more dramaturgically or dramatically, just trying to create this like mysterious object that is somehow attractive to Ning and Laura and Russell. It's kind of like someone working on something with like a little bright light that everybody else wants to kind of like see. Um, so that's changed a little bit. Just kind of like someone working on tinkering on something somehow desirable or attractive.
I think was this at Miller, Ian? Like Misato was like, or maybe even at Lincoln Center, Misato, you were like you said, Ian, like we should know that something's happening, and we look over there and we're like, oh, we have to go to it. Like we're like moths drawn to the flame or something. Yeah. And I don't think any of us could really do that at Lincoln Center. We're like, huh? Like what does that mean? But now it's like, it's irresistible. You know, Ian's like tinkering, like he said, and we're like, oh, we have to,
like a magnet.
Yeah, it's like scary. Like the violence is inescapable or something.
I think it's changed from being a little bit more like transparent in that video to being a little bit more mysterious at first, kind of just like a hint of something, and then letting it grow slower. I think it's maybe expanded a bit. Yeah.
If we also added lighting, right?
Right. So there's more there's less light at that point, obviously. I mean, even in that show, but I guess you do it more now.
That's where it actually started, was that show. I remember, I think Misato, you suggested that there was a blackout, and in the
yes.
Yeah, and then like that was the only piece on the concert that actually had like a lighting cue, and the lighting designer was so excited. And it's like, oh, I gotta do something.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, it's a part of theatricalization for me, because the last part is really exciting, but also it's really violent. And I really liked Ian did it without any smile, very cool way. And then Russell joins, and then little by little, everyone comes. And for me, from the beginning, to show this kind of duality of violence, it's not good, but it's exciting. It seemed to me ideal that two ladies and two gentlemen constitute Yan Wire, because the girls are related to something very nice and kind, and violent part is related to masculinity. But then after all, everyone joins to be attracted by some very violent aspects, and they start to hit really. And as two pianists are not really percussionists, their way to hit it is really like hitting someone. But it's at the same time, I liked it. It's not nice to say, but I enjoyed it, and everyone likes it. But it's as I said before, it's really the same thing to hit someone or really violent action, but it can be also enjoyable. It sounds awful, but I really wanted to evoke this duality. But of course, you are really totally excited with the sound, and you don't really think about it. But still, I wanted to show it. And of course, if you don't see the performance, if you hear the recording, you don't really get it. But yeah, it's really a privilege of the live performance. And even though we, Ilan, you said that you wanted to hear it live, and with vibration, real vibration of piano or percussion sound, would be really different from the recording. And I think still I really believe in this privilege of live performances, because live performances you can't fast forward or skip through quickly. You have to join really other people's affairs, and then you might live them as if they were yours. And I think that's the really important thing of live performance.
Right, being with other people in the same space. I mean, it's not being in your own room with the headphones. Definitely. Well, we all miss it now, especially, I'm sure. I mean, you just told us that everything is normal over there in Japan. So I think we're all thinking about just joining you tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning in 14 days.
Yeah. Oh,
Fantastic.
I just remembered something about that performance that we should immortalize. It's also very dangerous. Ian, during this performance, was holding. You remember that? Was holding the bass drum back because it was right at the front, and David Franzen was in the front row, just like eye level with that bass drum, and I remember like vividly looking out, and he's just like, you know, because the bass drum almost tips over. So, never forget.
Yeah,
yes,
because I could see him looking at it. He kind of saved that performance a little bit.
Yeah, he said he was ready to catch it if it fell.
Just put a composer that's a friend in that seat every time. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I mean, I remember also there's one thing, another kind of thing that seemed to be when I was following the score with the recording, with the video. There is that moment when Russell is joining on cymbals, which seemed to be quite short in the score, but was pretty, at least 20 seconds longer. Was that kind of something you gave the players some freedom with, Misato, or that just happened naturally?
Actually, it wasn't written down while the first performance. I had this idea to do it, but I wanted to try it first with players, how it gives. And also this kind of timing changes every time with places and acoustic as well. So I always have a difficulties to write down the timing and also dynamics because it changes. And it depends on players as well. So anyway, nothing was written, not only because I didn't know how to notate it, but I'm always in time for my compositions. So, and then we rehearsed together, and yes, it became like it was. And then I asked Ian how to notate it, and then he kindly did. But actually, afterwards, I noticed that this recording was on YouTube from Lincoln Center. So I dictated. So normally it must be same, but you find it not. But it's okay. It's like that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Well, it's really a pleasure to talk to you, and I would love to also hear so many of, especially your inspirations and how the pieces come into being. I mean, I was listening to a lot of pieces, and the beginning of each piece is usually a really great thing in your music, like the piano solo piece, the Möbius Ring, that we talked about, like Quark, Intermezzi 3, which Russell plays, which played in New York, and quite a lot of other pieces. I was listening to new string quartet, second string quartet, and also really amazing pulsating beginning, but really amazingly written for 4 players with 4 different rhythms and glissandos, and all over the place. It's super special, and I love the fact that there is time to appreciate things, you know. It's something that I really enjoy. I don't know what you think, Russell, Ian, Laura, and Bing.
Absolutely,
Also the titles. I love that string quartet name.
Yeah.
Brains.
That piece, yes. I'm now very much interested in brain functions. So yes, by the way, the piece that Ilan is going to conduct next year would be about brain. I hope it would happen. Yes.
Yeah, can't wait to see the score of that. And I kind of bit annoyed with myself that I've never conducted anything of your music. So now I have to kind of like make sure it happens fast. So I promise.
Yeah.
Right. With that, so I guess we are wrapping up our very last episode of 2020. Thank you so much for being here with us, Misato from
Thank
Japan
you.
and Ilan from Israel, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you. And so, to everyone who joined us for this episode of Feedback, thank you for supporting us, for watching Feedback series this fall. And we will be continuing the series in the new year in 2021, but we're shifting to a Thursday only schedule. And we will be sending out notices of the date and the content of the series. So please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss those episodes. And to support this series, please visit us at patreon.com, where you can become a patron and receive cool bonuses and rewards like those awesome ringtones by Russell and Laura if you haven't gotten one yet. And then also download codes for YoungWire current series and more. Thank you so much for being here.